Welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. And remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube, listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Today, we are talking Bucks basketball, and we're talking to one of the legends in Wisconsin sports media, I should say. Jim Paschke is going to join us. He's called Badgers basketball and football. He's called Brewers baseball. He's called Bucks basketball. Of course, now you know him as the Fox Sports Wisconsin play-by-play announcer for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he has been announcing in Wisconsin for decades, and I'm super excited to talk to him today and talk about his career along with this season with the Milwaukee Bucks. He's been calling games from the Bucks Arena, even though the team has been in Orlando. What has that been like? We'll ask him about that, and also, can the Bucks come back against the Heat? And finally, his coverage, and I've said this before on the podcast, but Fox Sports Wisconsin's coverage when the Bucks decided not to play Game 5 against Orlando to protest social injustice, that the hour or 2 hours of television on Fox Sports Wisconsin with Jim Paschke, who will join us, and Marcus Johnson and Zora Stevenson was one of the most powerful hours or couple hours of television that I've been able to watch. And I'm going to ask him about that. What was that like covering a breaking news situation instead of a game that day? So we will ask all of those questions, and I'm super excited to talk to Jim Paschke. Joining me this week on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast is Jim Paschke. You recognize him as the longtime Milwaukee Bucks announcer on Fox Sports Wisconsin. And, of course, you recognize him as well as when he did Brewers and different things across the state of Wisconsin. You can follow him on Twitter at Paschketball. And, Jim, I really appreciate the time this morning. Super excited to talk to you and get to know you a little better and then talk about the Milwaukee Bucks.
It's my pleasure to be with you, Hunter.
Well, let's first get into the kind of the current state of affairs with the Milwaukee Bucks here in just a little while. I want to start, though, by asking you about your career. I know we discussed this off camera a little bit, but let our viewers know a bit about how you got to calling Milwaukee sports and specifically the Bucks for so long.
Well, just by chance, I had been doing sports news, a little bit of radio first and then sports news on a nightly basis, and that brought me to Milwaukee in 1980, and then in 1986, I got a phone call that was unexpected and kind of wild, but the person asked me if I would consider doing Bucks and Brewers telecasts, and of course, it took me about 10 seconds to say yes, and
Right.
Here we are 34 years later, but everybody has a story that's different than someone else's story, and very few people get a phone call asking them if they want to do Major League Baseball and Major League NBA basketball at the same time. But that's what happened, and I said yes. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do those jobs at that point, but took a chance, and both the people I work for and the fans of Wisconsin allowed me to learn on the job, and it's worked out pretty well for me at least, and I hope for the fans as well.
Yeah, what was it like doing both of those at the same time, both doing basketball and Brewers baseball, in a year?
Well, back then, the only month I did not travel was October, and that, of course, was training camp for the Bucks. So I was gone at least most of the day because they had 2-a-days, one in the morning and one at night practices, getting ready for the season. So, it was a 12-month proposition. However, back then we didn't do that many games. We had 60 telecasts for Brewers baseball and 30 for the Bucks. And then over the years, that got to be more. I think the final year I worked both was 96, and I want to say we had 105, maybe 110 baseball games, and we were up to 60 basketball games. And then it started to get a little too much. It wasn't too much for me, but I felt like one person doing all of that would have worn out the audience. So at that point, I made a choice and went with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Gotcha. Did you always want to be a play-by-play announcer since you were young?
No, I was very shy as a kid. I didn't like talking in front of two people, sometimes one person. I had to learn how to become a little more extroverted and put myself out there.
Sure.
But when I did, I just enjoyed sportscasting. I've been around sports since the age of 14, professional sports. And so it was comfortable in that way. and I enjoyed it very much. But learning the craft of broadcasting took a little bit of time. And early in my career, I did a little play-by-play on radio when I first started, and I enjoyed that very much. I knew that it was probably unlikely that I would end up in one professional sport, let alone two. So I just let my career move along. And, one of the breaks I got was moving to Madison, Wisconsin, and working on the Badger football and basketball networks. And people, saw me working on those games and heard me working on those games. And, I had no expectation of getting into full-time play-by-play at this level. But as I said, I got that fortuitous phone call, and I was very happy to give it a try. And it is what I really love to do. I enjoy sports news, that's fine, but this is the ultimate test for me, trying to put all of the information together and then insert it into a broadcast at the right time, be somewhat fully informative if possible, but somewhat entertaining along the way. And that's predicated on the partners you work with, and I've been very blessed in that regard. So did I expect to do it? No. Did I want to do it? Yes. Am I happy I got to do it? Absolutely.
Yeah, you talk about all the different parts that go into making a play-by-play broadcast. It's best, and it's not just showing up to the arena and calling a game. There's so much preparation. There's talking with your partner. What would you say is maybe the most challenging part of doing a play-by-play broadcast?
I think inserting all of the information that you have prepared into a game at the right time and not overdoing it. When we start out in this career, we tend to rely on stats much more than we should. And then as we progress, you get into storytelling, you get into perspective and context. And, I think doing that really well is a great test. And I enjoy that. I do enjoy the homework. When I was in school, I wasn't a big homework person, but with this job, you can't get by without incredible amounts of homework. It's really all I do. I mean, it's 80% of getting ready to do a game is preparing. I mean, before we're talking here, I've been working for 2 or 3 hours to get ready for a pregame show for Game 5 of the playoffs. So, it's constant. You're looking for little pieces of information that you can use. And I'll say this, when I first started 47 years ago, the world was different. I would kill to get an out-of-town newspaper. I had to work to find a different perspective. And that was true when I started play-by-play. Today, you can read anything from anywhere at any time, and you feel like you're never finished. So it's a different problem. Early on, we didn't have enough information, and we talked to people. And now there's so much information, we forget to talk to people. So I try to, balance all of that, try to talk to people, and yet you feel like you're never done because of the constant overload of information. There's always something new to learn out there, and I never feel like I'm up to speed on that. I go into every broadcast these days believing that the audience probably knows as much or more than I do about that particular game and about the team. So it keeps you on your toes. You have to work pretty hard to find new information.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Jim Paschke joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Paschketball, of course, the longtime Bucks announcer on currently on Fox Sports Wisconsin. Getting into your current position with the Milwaukee Bucks, what has it been like to be there through the not so good years? They won 15 games, a few years back, and then being there the past 2 years when they've been really good, best record in the NBA, and especially this year when they have title hopes. What is because you've been announcing for so long, what is it like, the ebb and flow of these different teams that you've covered?
Well, it's really interesting. When I was covering the Bucks as a local sports reporter, they were very good. And then when I started in 1986, they were still pretty good. We had 50 victory seasons under Don Nelson the first couple of years, and one for sure that I remember, but they were good. And then they continued to be decent for a couple of years. Then they went into that long drought. I think it was 12 years that was pretty difficult. And then, there were spots where it was okay, 2001. And, it's been all over the map. And in my time, nothing like the last 2 years, winning 60 games and then 56 this year in the abbreviated season. But it's not about that so much. I mean, it's easier when the team's good, that's for sure. People seem to think we're better at our jobs when the team wins most of the time. But it's about basketball. It's about every individual game, I think, is the way I approach that. I was hoping for and looking for a good game every night. So you narrow it way down. It's not about winning 60 games. It's about winning tonight, and you present that game in and of itself. And, I don't really think about, the tough years. You reflect on those and realize what you just did. But on a given night, you try to stay as positive, and you look at every game as its own entity.
Sure. That makes sense. And reflecting a little bit, are there a couple of games or a game that you have that kind of will always stick out in your mind that you've called either with the Brewers or with the Bucks, maybe even recently?
Well, I think with the Brewers, the Juan Nieves no-hitter on April 15th, 1987,
Yeah.
as the team was jumping out to that great start, and that was a heck of a year. Paul Molitor had his hitting streak. So those were two things that really stand out with my baseball career. In basketball, there have been far too many really to remember. There have been some great games and some great moments. Michael Redd with the all-time record for 57 points. He broke Kareem's record. That was against Utah. And, Brandon Jennings' 55-point game was a thriller. And there have been many, many others. Giannis is a nightly thrill. So, I have plenty, and I don't think I'd choose one over the other when it comes to basketball.
Sure, that makes sense. Going back to that
championship would be nice.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
All these years, and a championship would be nice. I am curious, going back to what you said about the Juan Nieves no-hitter, what is it like announcing a no-hitter? Because so many people are like, there's a balance there of not jinxing it and not saying not saying no-hitter. There's a lot of people who say, you guys have the power to end a no-hitter. What was that like announcing one of those? And has it changed your perspective of announcing a no-hitter? Has that changed throughout the years?
Well, I have no experience calling no-hitters other than the one I did, and that was 34 years ago or so, 30, whatever it is, 33 years ago. And it's changed. You couldn't do it that way today. Now, that was the 5th game that I ever broadcast. So let's keep that in perspective, because I had absolutely no clue what I was doing generally when it came to broadcasting Major League Baseball. And then 5 games into it, 5 telecasts into it, I have the no-hitter. So I remember heading into the 7th inning, between the 6th and the 7th, I was working with Mike Hegan, and I took off my headset and said, "What do I do now? What do we do?" And he said, "Don't mention it." Well, that was in 1987. You could not get away with that today because, first of all, you have social media and everything, and, we don't affect the outcome.
Right.
And we just don't. But it was interesting because in adhering to what fans thought was a baseball adage, and certainly what players knew and did as a baseball adage, was not mentioning the no-hitter. The media got on us a little bit, got on me a little bit about that. The fans loved it. I got so much mail saying, "Thank you, you did the right thing." And Bud Selig, the next night when we came home, he had seen all of the people commenting on it, and he said, "Jim, you did the right thing. He got the no-hitter." So, it's kind of a funny thing. And now every time there's a Brewer no-hitter in progress, they get to the 6th inning and my phone blows up, and sure enough, it has to be mentioned, and the no-hitter disappears. And, I mean, it's kind of a strange situation. But you couldn't do that today. If I were doing baseball today, I would totally do it in a different manner. But I guess if you have one and you can please the fans in how you did it, I guess it's all right. But that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure there are 2 answers, and one is from ancient times and one is from current times. So that's how I look at that.
Sure. So you'd say in current times you'd mention that there is a no-hitter going on.
I think you have to. And again, I mean, even back in 1987, I didn't believe that we affected it, but it was such a part of baseball lore. And I'm sitting next to a world champion in Mike Hegan, and again, in my 5th game, I wasn't going to do something that he would have been uncomfortable with, perhaps. So, I live with that. I enjoy that. I laugh at that, and I was able to privileged, not able, but privileged to call a major league no-hitter.
Yeah, that's super cool. Jim Paschke joining us here on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. I do want to get into the Bucks and specifically Giannis. What has it been like to see Giannis grow into what he is today, and kind of get to know, as you guys do with the TV crew, what has it been like to see him grow so much from when he came into the league to where he is now, and just having a front row seat to that?
Well, when he got here, I liked him right away. I mean, he's a very likable guy. When he was 18 years old, he was laughing all the time and telling jokes. And, he was a little kid and didn't know how to drive, hadn't had a smoothie, hadn't had lobster. It was wonderful watching him come to this country by himself for quite a period of time, many months without his family, and try to adapt to our life here. And then, of course, he seemed like he was fun-loving, but there was this fierceness in his face when he was working out, when he was practicing, certainly when he was playing games. And that's what I think I've seen the most. It's just a will to be the best, and it has happened very quickly for him. I mean, I remember after he won the Most Improved Award, and he's the only player to win Most Improved, MVP, and Defensive Player of the Year awards in his career. But after he won Most Improved, I said, well, you won't win that again because that's how it works. And he said, wait a minute, why not? He said, if I become the MVP, I would have to be very improved to do that. Why can't I win both? That's how he approached this. Wow. And sure enough, he won the first MVP. Now he's won a Defensive Player of the Year and is about to win a second MVP award. So really a remarkable story. Dave Babcock, who scouts internationally for the Bucks, saw him in Greece. He was playing in, not the greatest league in the world, but he was, just a prodigy, really. And the Bucks saw something. John Hammond made the draft pick, and the rest is history. But Giannis he's a fierce competitor, and what's happening now in the series against Miami, I'm sure, is driving him crazy. I can't talk to him because we're 1,200 miles apart or whatever it is. Yeah. But I know that every game is eating him up, and now the injury, the double ankle sprain in games 3 and 4, probably has him beside himself. And as I'm preparing for Game 5, I'm thinking, okay, Giannis is going to want to play on that bad ankle, and do you let him do it? Well, do you protect him against himself? So those are all questions that are in my mind today as we look forward. But watching him develop and the consistency with which he plays the game, and at the incredibly high level athletically that he plays the game, is just beyond description. It's phenomenal to watch an athlete like that every night.
Well, yeah, that's what it seems like to us on TV, and I can only imagine what it's like, to be in the arena every night for that as well. So, you mentioned that they are heading into Game 5, and they're playing in Orlando. What has it been like announcing the games from Milwaukee, with screens in front of you, watching the game and announcing it from the Bucks Arena?
Well, we started with a couple of exhibition games, just inter-squad situations, and then that I had never done this before, so that was good to get that under our belts. And then we had the seeding games, the 8 seeding games. Those were fine. It hasn't been as difficult as I thought. There are some things that are missing. I usually have somebody next to me who's helping with stats. I miss Mike Faulkner greatly on these broadcasts, and we have a stage manager, Leon Daroon. They've been with us for 30 plus years. You miss that because you realize how much they mean to the broadcast. But short of that, it's been okay. There's been a few things. I have to do all of the stats and all of the numbers and everything, so I have to be a little slower and careful with that. Once in a while, there's a glitch there with one person doing it as opposed to 2 or 3. And it's been interesting. But overall, I'd say it's been okay. People have said it sounds like we're in the arena, and I guess that's a testament to not only the broadcasters, but the entire production crew and everyone who has put on these games. So it's been an interesting experiment, probably not one that most broadcasters would say they would like to do every night, but we'll see what happens moving forward, particularly, with the early part of next season. I know the league would, can't wait to have, all leagues can't wait to have fans back in the arenas and stadiums, but who knows how long we're going to be under this scenario. We'll just have to play it out and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good that you now know that you're comfortable doing it and can do it in that scenario. I want to bring up one thing before we get into kind of looking at how this Bucks Heat series has went. The game 5 against Orlando that the Bucks decided not to play, because first of all, I have to applaud you, Marcus Johnson, Zora Stevenson. That hour of television was incredibly powerful, and how you guys handled that breaking news scenario for that hour was, like I said, just, it was honestly, and I said this on social media that day, and I've said it to a couple of people since in my podcast, it was one of the most powerful hours of television that I've been able to watch. And so I just want to applaud you, first of all, for how you guys handled that situation. But second of all, I want to just ask you, what was that broadcast like? Take us through kind of what you found out, when you found things out, and what it was like to do constant breaking news coverage instead of calling a basketball game.
Well, at this point in time, it's interesting because I think if you're thinking about what's going on in the world and you're watching, it's a very sensitive time. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, we can always lose our jobs over one sentence. That's always been true. But these days we've seen broadcasters lose their jobs over a tweet or, you know, over something that was said when they thought their mic wasn't open. There have been 3 in the last couple of months. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's in the back of your mind. It always is, you know, be very careful what you say. Sometimes you realize that maybe it's what people hear as opposed to what you say too. So, you know, that's an entirely different situation. If somebody hears something that offends them, you know, it's just delicate. You have to be very careful and very aware all the time about what you're saying. So now let's talk about doing 2 hours of television without any preparation, any warning, any heads up on the subject that we dealt with when the Bucks decided to boycott. I had Marcus Johnson in the locker room with me, and Zora Stevenson was in the Bucks media room, and without them, that would have been an impossible broadcast to do. They did all the heavy lifting. Craig Kashan was there. He helped because he was monitoring social media, trying to get information. So he would come in and tell us what he was learning, and that gave us all a little chance to breathe and collect ourselves. That was a very interesting experience. And, you know, I was able to, as I look back on it, I stepped back a little bit and let Marcus and Zora carry the load on that, which I think I should have done and was happy that I did do. And it also gave me a chance to just be calm and listen. And one of the great messages out of all of this is the scenario that is occurring in the country now is we all need to listen more and talk less. And so I didn't really think about it at the time, but I felt myself trying to do that. And I've always tried to listen more than I speak anyway, which is a strange thing for somebody who gets paid to talk. To say, but I really do. And so, you know, we got through that, and the feedback that we were getting during the telecast and after the telecast was very positive. And I will always remember that as, I mean, it's one of the most impactful things I've ever been involved with in broadcasting. And I'm humbled by the opportunity to take part in something like that. And I'm glad that it seemed to have gone fairly well and that we were upfront about the subject matter and we tackled it from the heart. You have to do that from the heart and the head. And we were all able to do that day. And I'm very proud of that 2 hours of television. I'm sure there were people who took exception to some of the subject matter. That's just the way the world is today, and that's fine. But I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the people that I worked with that day. And the crew behind the scenes was helping us to get through that. It was an exceptional couple of hours in my lifetime, really.
And you should be proud, and it was exceptional to watch. You know how you guys felt. It really came through, and it really came through that way. And just the way you spoke, how eloquently, and how it just made sense what you were saying. You know, it wasn't specifically prepared. Sure, you had thoughts in your head, but to put them the way you guys did, it was just like I said. You should definitely be proud.
Well, I think there's something that I could say here that would point out the greatest broadcasters to me find a way to make what they do not about themselves. Like if that were about any one of the people it would have had a different feel to it. And,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't about any of us at that point. It was about something much greater. And everybody on that broadcast had the ability to understand that, and it's the way they really feel. So you
Mm-hmm.
saw the people on that broadcast in a different way. And I think you probably
Yeah.
saw the real Marcus Johnson, the real Zora Stevenson, the real Craig Kashan, and I hope you saw the real Jim Paschke there. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I think that makes me very proud of what we were a part of that day. It's not an accomplishment. It's nothing like that. It's just the humbling experience of being part of that type of subject matter on live television, and to be with people that are truly great people.
And it definitely seemed like that definitely came across the screen. So getting to kind of our last topic here, specifically about this Bucks Heat series, kind of not gone the way of the Bucks, obviously down 3-1 now. They get the win, winning in overtime on Sunday. What do you think has been kind of the downfall as of late for this team, not being as dominant and just not playing as well, really, since they came back into the bubble, since before that? What kind of has been, in your eyes, the downfall that has kind of just been not that team that we were so used to seeing on a night in, night out basis from January, February, March?
I just read something this morning that makes so much sense to me. We watch all the time. We have the eye test, and then we have analytics, and then we have validation in terms of science and that type of thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
just read something today that in 20 weeks, your hand-eye coordination, all of the things, your muscle memory, all of those types of things can just disappear. And guess how long the NBA was on hiatus? About 20 weeks. So, it's an interesting thought, because the Bucks were steamrolling the NBA. They were playing at such a high level, a dominant level of basketball, a historic level of basketball, and then they had to stop that for 20 weeks. And I think there's something to that, because when they went into the bubble, it didn't appear to be the same team with the same muscle memory, the same focus, and I think it's understandable. And then that has gradually improved, but it hasn't improved to the level perhaps that we saw during the regular season
Right.
prior to the break. So, I think that's partially it. It's difficult to watch because this team had everything going on. I thought that they had learned what kind of focus it took in the playoffs after the problem with Toronto last year, losing 4 straight games after being up 2-0. I thought that was the lesson they took out of it, and I knew that and felt that they had understood that you can't flinch, you can't blink in the playoffs. But then they get thrown into this whole bubble thing, and it's just been very difficult. Giannis said very early, the team that wins the championship will really have earned it, and that
Yeah.
is, to me, 100% correct. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it, unfortunately, affecting the Milwaukee Bucks. But it's a strange year. I don't know, quite how to evaluate it at this point. I want to see 20 years from now. I won't be around probably, but I would love to see the postmortem on 2020, and I'd like to see
Yeah.
the documentary on the bubble and all of the things that went into this, because it's been incredibly difficult. And it's just hard to evaluate what has happened at this point. Now, the bubble is strange. So, no team in NBA history has been down 0-3 and won a series. And the Bucks, after going down 0-3, said, "You know what? We're in the bubble. It's all strange, goofy, and whatever it is. Why can't we be the first?" Well,
Mm-hmm.
they are the 140th team to try, and we'll see if that comes true. Wouldn't that be a story if they were able to come back from 0-3? It would be remarkable, and I haven't ruled that out yet. And the question I have going into Game 5 is, do you take these one game at a time now, or do you have to convince yourself that there will be a Game 7? I'm contemplating that as we get ready for Game 5.
Yeah. What and just the last question, what are you specifically thinking about that? What would they do to adjust in Game 5 to think about, okay, we still might have a game or two left?
Well, I think you play them one at a time, but your mind maybe, and I'll be asking this question of Steve Novak
Mm-hmm.
and other people, because I think it's fascinating. I understand the concept of in my mind believing that there will be a Game 7. I think that's a positive approach to it, but I do
Mm-hmm.
know that you have to play Game 5 without respect to Game 6 and 7, but you still have to have that Game 7 in your scope, if you will, and on the horizon. And it has to be in the binoculars. You have to believe that you can get there or you won't get there, but you still have to play and win Game 5. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll see whether or not they have Giannis.
Yeah.
And obviously, that changes everything. We saw that they can win without him. They've won 6 times without him, lost 5 without him. But it's just so fascinating. That's the beauty of sport, is the unknown. You every time you watch a sporting event, you may see something that you've never seen before, and you may see something that's never happened before. So it's still a possibility that an NBA team could come from 03, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday night.
Exactly, and we're hoping it's the Milwaukee Bucks. Well, Jim, I really appreciate the time today and talking about the Bucks and your career, and it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and have watched you growing up for years calling the Bucks, and really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Hunter. It's been my pleasure.
That is Jim Paschke. He is the play-by-play announcer on Fox Sports Wisconsin for the Milwaukee Bucks, and of course, announced for the Brewers, announced for the Badgers. He's been all over Wisconsin sports for decades, and I really appreciate the time from Jim today. And I hope you enjoyed the interview. So much great insight talking about calling a no-hitter. I mean, it's rare that play-by-play announcers get to do that, and for it to be his 5th telecast calling Brewers baseball, to have a no-hitter is just amazing. So that was a great story, and of course his insight into the Game 5, when the Bucks did not play Game 5 against the Orlando Magic as well. His story behind that and the people he worked with and everything was very powerful there as well. And of course, not only learning about his career, but looking ahead to the Milwaukee Bucks and the Miami Heat as they play again tonight in Game 5. So thanks so much for watching or listening, whether you watched on YouTube, listened on SoundCloud. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and my conversation with Jim Paschke there. And remember, you can like the Facebook page, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. And enjoy the rest of your week. Go Bucks. And as always, stay positive.